All right, it looks like our recording has started, so we'll begin. Hello, everyone. This is Rebecca Dallin, Assistant Superintendent for Stormwater Quality here at the City of Oklahoma City. I'd like to officially welcome everyone to the August edition of our 2023 bi-monthly webinar series. We will begin the presentation momentarily, the main presentation. So I wanted to provide some information to help enhance everyone's experience during today's program. In order to reduce background noise, we ask that everyone keep themselves muted during the presentation. If anyone has any questions, feel free to type them into chat at any time. I will be monitoring chat for questions and have our speaker answer as many questions as we have time for today. If anyone would like to receive a certificate of attendance for today's webinar, please send me an email to request that. And I'm going to put my email address into chat right now so you'll have it handy. Each of the presentations in this webinar series will be available within a week or so after the scheduled webinar date on our website under Stormwater Workshops. And the section where these webinars are posted is called the webinar series. And of course, today's session will be the August edition. I'll post a link to that website later toward the end of today's program. And if anyone has any questions at this time, please feel free to type them into chat. But without further ado, I will play the very short webinar series welcome presentation.
Good afternoon and welcome to our bi-monthly Stormwater Quality webinar series. We always enjoy providing opportunities for everyone to learn how to help keep our local waterways clean. Remember, we're all downstream from someone else, so we all need to work together to protect our waterways. This year's series has several great presentations planned. You will have the opportunity to hear from some of our own stormwater quality staff as well as select guest speakers. We hope to see you for each session, so be sure to tune in. As we've briefly mentioned, each of the presentations should be available online within a week or so after the presentation is aired live. It will be posted on the workshop section of our Stormwater Quality website. We'll put a direct link to that page into chat toward the end of today's program. If you haven't signed up already, please do so now by pointing your phone's camera at the QR code for the newsletter or newsletters that you're interested in. The only way to sign up for either the construction or industrial training and education newsletters is via a direct website link or these QR codes. These options are both hidden in the email service site GovDelivery. These two newsletters are the main way that we announce upcoming training, webinars, and workshops, so be sure to sign up. The quarterly newsletter is the third QR code, and it provides overall information about what we're up to. You can find this one on the GovDelivery website or use the QR code today. If you miss any of these codes, be sure to send Rebecca an email and she'll send you the direct website links. We also have an excellent Lunch and Learn series planned for this year, and the registration announcements will be sent through these newsletters. Some of our presentations will be live and some will be pre-recorded. We do our best to provide as much detailed, accurate information as possible while also working with the presenter's strengths and their schedule. We live and work in a beautiful community here in Oklahoma City. For more information about stormwater, what we're up to, and local regulations, be sure to visit our website.
Up next is the main presentation for today's webinar. Today we're going to hear from Dawson McNeil. Dawson is an Environmental Unit Supervisor with the Stormwater Quality Management Division of the City of Oklahoma City's Public Works Department. He currently manages the Environmental Water Quality Section. Dawson has worked with other state agencies, including the Oklahoma Conservation Commission and the Oklahoma Water Resources Board. In 2014, he earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Agricultural Science and Natural Resources. Dawson is an avid outdoorsman and currently resides in Perkins, Oklahoma, with his wife and 2 daughters. Again, if anyone has any questions during today's presentation, please be sure to type them into chat. Dawson, go ahead and share your screen to begin your presentation. think if you hit duplicate or yeah, there's a way to duplicate your screen onto both.
Okay, sorry about that, Rebecca. Hold on 1 second. So
Yeah, that's fine.
I gotta move this on over. All right, sorry about that, everyone. Technical difficulties. That's pretty easy for me.
If there was a webinar without technical difficulties, I would be more concerned.
Yes.
Seems like a common theme.
All right. Can you see that? Or no?
Not yet.
Not yet?
It's thinking about it. There it goes.
Okay.
Yep. You can, if you hit hide on that little message, then we
Okay,
won't see that
gotcha.
little message. Yep.
I
Perfect.
just cannot see it. Okay. All I can see is myself on here. So, all right. Well, if it's going, that's fine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, Rebecca, and thanks for everyone for getting on. Today, I'm basically just going to be going over some of our monitoring efforts within the Lake Thunderbird watershed. Some of you might be familiar with the Lake Thunderbird TMDL. Really, I just want to give a little insight about what we do. Some of you might work for municipalities. Some of you might live within the Lake Thunderbird watershed or a TMDL watershed, but somehow it seems like most people are affected by these TMDLs. So let's get started here. Here, I'm just going to go through just a little bit about the introduction of Lake Thunderbird. So it's currently just over 6,000 acre reservoir. Lake Thunderbird is located in central Oklahoma. It's just over 250 square mile drainage area. Drainage areas within the Canadian and Oklahoma counties. Construction of the lake began in 1962 and was completed in 1965. Lake is owned by U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, constructed for flood control, municipal water supply, recreation, wildlife habitat. I believe it's Noble, Midwest City, and Norman. They get their primary water supply is from Lake Thunderbird. Here's just a little bit more historical review and introduction of the TMDL. And Lake Thunderbird. So Lake Thunderbird was designated as a sensitive water supply in 2002. And sensitive water supply within the state water quality standards. It'll kind of give a brief description of what classifies a certain body of water as a sensitive water supply. I do know, I'm not going to get into full details about exactly what a sensitive water supply is, but I do know that once a body of water is designated as a sensitive water supply, any new point sources are prohibited. There's some other qualifications as well to that. So in 2010, Lake Thunderbird was placed on the 303D list of impaired water bodies due to excessive chlorophyll A and turbidity, as well as dissolved oxygen. And just a little bit of background, if some of you guys might not know, but how these bodies of waters get onto get onto the 303D list. And really how that happens is there's a process and a lot of times that process definitely includes monitoring the water and doing water quality assessments. So there's I believe on Lake Thunderbird, it's been before the 2010, there had been water quality assessments since 2002 on it. Now the excessive chlorophyll A, that is non-supporting for the beneficial use of the public and private water supply, and then turbidity and dissolved oxygen. It was non-supporting for the beneficial use of the subcategory, which is the warm water aquatic community, which is subcategory of the fish and wildlife propagation. 2013, the final draft of the TMDL was released. And if any of you have really looked into a TMDL, there's just a ton of information in it. So I'm not going to go into too much detail into the TMDL, but I just kind of did some hot points right there. The targeted pollutants was the total nitrogen, total phosphorus, total suspended solids, and carbonaceous biochemical oxygen demanding substances. They also included the 35% reduction, and that came from their simulated watershed loading model from the 2008 and 2009 watershed load estimate. They also will establish general timelines for the implementation. And then, of course, in your TMDL, they're going to require compliance measures. Okay, here's the Lake Thunderbird long-term average, also known as the reduced long-term average. So right here, as you're looking at, this is for Oklahoma City only. This is not for any of the other municipalities that was involved with the Lake Thunderbird watershed. And basically, the reduced long-term average is considered the allowable load limits for the determination of compliance. Now, the MDL, or the maximum daily load, is derived from the long-term average. And I'll get into that here shortly. So Lake Thunderbird TMDL, or the maximum daily limit. Here I've kind of just got a little spreadsheet of the waste load allocations for each city. You can see there waste load allocations they're gonna designate as point sources, and that's gonna include the regulated stormwater discharges, and then load allocation, that's gonna be non-point sources, and including non-regulated communities. So some of those non-regulated communities, that was Noble and Midwest City. So they were able to get out of the TMDL because they just didn't have that much of a percentage within the watershed. Really, Noble had 0.26% of the watershed, so they were able to get out, likewise with Midwest City. So I've got kind of highlighted there, Oklahoma City. We've got our maximum daily limits there with total nitrogen and all the parameters there. Now you can see CBOD, I have colored green, and that's because whenever they did the 35% reduction, they found that CBOD was meeting the pollutant loading. So therefore, since it was meeting the pollutant loading, CBOD was not required to basically drop below that. Well, since it wasn't the 35%, it was under 35%. We didn't have to actually have a monitoring program that actually showed the pollutant loading of CBOD. It gets a little confusing there. So hopefully that was clear as mud for everyone. All right, so all of this stuff, everything that I'm mentioning here is pretty much in any TMDL. So they're going to have specific requirements for your MS4. And within this TMDL, these were the four specific requirements for the MS4s. It was having a TMDL compliance plan. And within a TMDL compliance plan, it's pretty much just going to be everything wrapped up into it. And And it's going to talk about everything from every BMP that you decide to implement, from street sweeping to education to it'll be a little bit about your evaluating progress at the end. It's going to be your really, it's going to talk about everything that you've done pretty much to comply. The second step is going to be developing or participating in a pollutant monitoring tracking program. And that's really what my presentation is about. So I'll start to talk about that a little bit later on. The third step is annual reporting. So they're going to want the municipality to basically to show the implementation of the TMDL report into your annual report. So if you wanted to look at ours, all you have to do is just go into Oklahoma City, look for stormwater, and then look at the annual report. Within the annual report, you'll be able to go into the TMDL section. It's just going to show pretty much a snapshot of what we do within the TMDL. Of course, evaluating progress. Of course, they want to see that. They want to see how well you're doing. Is your BMPs effective? And have you made progress towards compliance? And of course, that's going to be wrapped up also within your compliance plan. All right, here's the TMDL timeline. So I just wanted to kind of give this snapshot for you guys, because like I said, it can be kind of confusing because a TMDL can just continue. So 2013 was whenever the TMDL final draft was released. And of course, like I said earlier, as soon as it was released, they said you have to do this, this, and this by this time, and this time, and this time. So 2015, they put a timeline on there. 2015, you need to have a compliance plan update. You need to have your monitoring plan and QAPP submitted. And so we were able to submit that in 2015. We, however, did not start the implementation phase, phase one of the TMDL monitoring plan until 2016. 2022, we're about a year behind. We should the phase one of the compliant, or the phase one of the monitoring plan should have ended in 2020. However, we were just a little bit behind. We ended it in 2021, and we was able to get the 5-year compliance plan and the TMDL monitoring plan submitted right after 2021. So I mean, March or something in 2022. We're trying to stick with the 10-year compliance plan. So we're hoping that we'll finish up monitoring in 2025, and then we have to, of course, submit our compliance plan, submit our monitoring plan in 2026. And that's kind of how you get off schedule, because of course, when you submit that, you have to wait for ODQ for approval if you decide to change any programs. And of course, if you want to stick on schedule, you've already got to have a management plan almost in place, a compliance plan in place, ready to start that phase 3 monitoring plan, which should begin 2026 to 2030. So. All right, let's get into the main topic that we're trying to cover here. So the pollutant tracking and monitoring program. So the goal of the program is to establish the effectiveness of the selected best management practices and demonstrate progress toward achieving the reduction goals of the TMDL. The reduction goals were those long-term averages, the maximum daily load limit that I showed you earlier. So of course, any MS4 they're going to put out all those BMPs that I kind of mentioned, education, to maybe it's stricter construction, BMPs, ordinances, whatever. And your monitoring programs should somewhat be able to tell you, hey, are you guys, is it getting better? Is it getting worse? What's going on, basically? So it should demonstrate progress towards achieving those reduction goals. So next step is that they give you an option to participate in a coordinated regional monitoring program or develop your own program. So at the start of this, of course, they give you that option. We could have went in and coordinated with Moore and Norman, but Oklahoma City opted out to develop their own program. Within the your monitoring program and in the TMDL, they're going to give you 8 requirements that need to be included in your monitoring plan and your program. I'm not going to go through every single requirement, but I will just mention one requirement, and that requirement is that they state that at a minimum, the sample shall be analyzed for total phosphorus, total nitrogen, total suspended solids, and carbonaceous biochemical oxygen demanding substances. So even though you don't have to have a pollutant loading to show pollutant loading reduction for CBOD, they still want you to have a program to sample that parameter. Okay. These next few slides, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to go into the phase 1 of our monitoring plan, which is the 5-year monitoring cycle. And then I'll kind of go into the summary, and I'll go through that with each one of our monitoring programs. Okay, so like I said, the phase 1 monitoring program, this was the program that was started in 2016 and it was supposed to end in 2020, 5 years. So we established 3 monitoring programs: illicit discharge detection and elimination program, and that's pretty much our dry weather field screening. The second one was the major outfall, and that's with passive samplers. And then our more in-depth program, that's going to be our pour point trend program, and that's going to consist of the fixed interval and the continuous monitoring. All right, we'll start off with the illicit discharge detection and elimination program, also known as the dry weather field screening. So what we ended up doing was we ended up establishing 33 stations within the Lake Thunderbird watershed within Oklahoma City jurisdiction. And basically, if any of you have ever worked with sampling, or if you've ever done a dry weather field screening, it's pretty simple program. It's really kind of like that low hanging fruit. It's pretty easy, but anyway, so the parameters that we monitored was just water temperature, discharge, pH, total chlorine, total copper, phenols, and detergents. And basically with the dry weather field screening, we're going off of the Chapter 40 CFR Code of Federal Regulations established by EPA. And so we're pretty much, it's exactly, anyone can look and see how it's done. But within our monitoring program, we say that we're only required to monitor the stations one time during the 5-year period. However, we always like to go above and beyond, which is good. So since it's that low-hanging fruit for us, just an easy program for us, we just decided that we're just going to sample it every year, or try to sample them every year. So you can see there at these 33 stations, We visited the stations 242 times. Let's see here, total chlorine detected during 10 site visits at 5 locations. Really, we didn't get any other detects. Sorry, I forgot to mention this. This is the summary, the 5-year compliance report summary. So this is the summary over the 5 years. We visited 242 times, only got total chlorine detected at 10 site visits at 5 locations. Really, I want to say they were all at detect limit, and there was one that was just barely above detect limit. Uh, there wasn't any significant like pollution sources that we found from the total chlorine. There wasn't. Most of the times, well, actually, I think 9 out of the 10 times it was just pooled water. So we think it was most likely just probably irrigation or something like that kind of happening. But we go through the whole process, and usually that process goes: you have a initial site visit, then you have a follow-up, or then you have a second site visit, then you have a follow-up visit. And within that program, it specifically states that you have to have 3 days of dry weather before you can sample. And then when you do sample, you have to have at least 4 hours between the initial sample and the second sample, and then no more than 24 hours. So if our technicians went out there and they sampled at 3 hours, of course we would QA flag it and it wouldn't be used. And they sampled at 26 hours, same thing. So our Oklahoma City recommendations for this program was just to continue into phase 2. Currently, we are in phase 2, so we are still doing that. All right, here's the second program that we have. This is the major outfall program. 27 stations were established. Stations were scheduled on a rotating year basis. So half of them we would sample 1 year, then the other half we would sample the other year. It was a concentration-based pollutant screening program to capture the first flush. So we were where we ended up placing these at was kind of targeting the low, medium, and high density residential uses. We was targeting the wet weather events, and then the pollutants that we were collecting samples for was all the main pollutants that we were required to. So all right, here's the 5-year compliance report summary for the major outfall program. 223 samples were collected. Noisy data. I mean, it was, if you've ever ran a program like that, I mean, you would just understand. Basically, the data represents a range of storm events, types, and seasonality. So you might, as you can see on the map, that's how we split them off. So the southeast side or the southwest side was one group, the northeast side was the other group. And sometimes it just depends on the rain. Sometimes you might get a heavy storm to blow through on the top north portion of group 1, but it would barely hit maybe on the other sides. There was just stuff happening all the time. It's really a hard program really to get data off of. So also the land uses not represented evenly. So basically what that means is like, say for example, group 1 data, there might have only been like 3 sites that was located in a low residential area, and maybe all sites were in high residential area, and maybe there was none in moderate or something. So it was just, it was really hard to place those sites out. And of course, the sites are small and often ephemeral. That's definitely the biggest problem right there, because depending on the storm, you really might need just a really big storm to come through and be able to, where you could collect water. This program was also conducted quarterly, so we was only collecting this program or these samples once every 3 months. Let's see here, no statistically significant differences in data. And then, of course, Oklahoma City recommendations, which we recommended to discontinue the program. However, after not really receiving any info, we just ended up still having the program still in effect for the next phase. All right, this is really our big sampling program right here for definitely our best program that we have for our monitoring program for Lake Thunderbird. So 3 stations were established. They were established on the outside boundary of our Oklahoma City boundary. The 3 stations represent 78.8% of Oklahoma City's contributing drainage to Lake Thunderbird. And within this 4-point trend, there was 2 types of monitoring: the fixed interval and continuous. So I'll go into both of those here shortly. Okay, here's our fixed interval program, and this is going to be the phase 1 monitoring plan. So our plan was go out there, monitor the schedule, monitor the sites every 4 months. We was going to go out there, collect grab samples. Those grab samples, of course, we're going to include TSS, TP, TN, and CBOD. And then the in situ, just the in-stream measurements, they were going to include discharge, dissolved oxygen, turbidity, and water temperature. And then pH was initiated in 2020. Okay, the 5-year compliance report summary for the fixed interval programs. The stations were visited 67 times. Data were assessed when applicable by state water quality standards using the use support assessment protocol. So I don't know if any of you have ever assessed data by the state water quality standards, but there are certain requirements that you have to go by when you're assessing this data. And it's when you are assessing this, it is extremely important to definitely understand what you're doing with it, because this will affect, of course, future listing on the 303D list, and it could affect, of course, getting back onto getting more TMDLs listed, just because of possibly someone not assessing the data correctly. So I'm just going to go through there just real quick. Right here, I just have it's just a spreadsheet basically. Right here, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse or not. But anyways, here's the beneficial uses. We've got the fish wildlife propagation. This is the primary body contact recreation, private public water supply, agriculture, and aesthetics. And so I'm going to go through just right here, 570, for example. So Elm Creek, this is a water body ID number. And so FS is fully supporting for fish wildlife propagation. So fully supporting on water quality variables, which would be dissolved oxygen. It would be oil and grease, and then turbidity. ID insufficient data for pH. Of course, I said that earlier, where we kind of just started assessing it a little bit later on. And then aesthetics, fully supporting for oil and grease. So like I said earlier, like within the say water quality standards, they're going to tell you how many samples you need. They're going to tell you how far back you can go to use what data, and then they're going to tell you uh, uh, within that data how it's going to, if it will support, if it will be non-supporting, and so on. Here you can see 568, I have non-support, so it was non-supporting for the warm water aquatic community, which is the subcategory for the fish and wildlife propagation. And that was for dissolved oxygen. So for this program, Oklahoma City recommended to retire station 568. Really, 568 was just a ephemeral stream. It really, it was just a tough stream. It was a small stream, a small watershed. It was going dry half of the year. We just really wasn't getting good data from it. So we also recommended to discontinue the laboratory water quality samples, expand the in situ parameters to include specific conductance and total alkalinity. And then instead of conducting monitoring every 3 months, we've actually upped it to conduct it every other week. All right, this is our biggest program right here. This is what you call your firstborn child right here that you take care of the most, I guess. But anyway, that's bad analogy. But anyways, the continuous monitoring program, so installation of automatic sampler stations, and this is an extremely big decision for any manager, because uh, whatever samplers you decide to purchase, program, you're just be ready, because whatever you decide to purchase, you're going to be stuck with it throughout, unless if you get out early enough. But you'll be with that same program for throughout the monitoring program. So for in this case example, we went with just Hawk. So we have to purchase all of their equipment. And really, each station is going to cost you about $20,000 or so just for a station to be up and running. And there's a lot of work that goes into these stations. Of course, you can kind of see in that picture there on the far right, we've got a technician, Michael Adams. He's sitting there and he's collecting water out of our sampling box there. So you're going to have an ice chest. There's our flow logger, data logger, and that's really what holds a lot of our data. And then it sends it off to our computer, basically. Right there in that corner, of course, that's our auto sampler head. That's how you program exactly pretty much everything. So if you want time weighted sampling, do you want flow weighted sampling, whatever you want, that's what you're going to do. So of course, for us, we went with flow weighted sampling. And so what that means is basically a certain amount of flow comes through, we're going to take a sample. And you can see in the picture in the far right, there's the hydrograph of Hog Creek Station 24. The more water that's going to pass through, of course, the more samples that it's going to collect. So for it to be able to know that, you are going to have to develop a stage discharge relationship. And this is like the number one thing when you are trying to get pollutant loadings, is developing this stage discharge relationship. When we first started initiating this program, I was out there all the time trying to collect flows, constantly collecting flows, trying to build this relationship here. As you can see up here in this top picture, that's our other technicians. They are grabbing those flows. So we, in 2021, we purchased our area Doppler current profiler. That has helped. It has just helped so much because, of course, when it gets to flood stage levels, you are unable to collect flow with handheld devices. So you need some kind of boat or floating device to be able to catch those accurate flow measurements for you to create that stage discharge relationship. All right, so program continuous, of course, year-round monitoring. It began in 2017. Composite samples are taken every 5 days. So like I said, we have a flow weight where it's flow weighted samples. So if we set it on a certain amount, within 5 days, we might have 20 samples. Of course, whenever it starts going dry, if it's on that same pacing interval, you might have 7 samples by the end of the week. Sometimes you never know. Sometimes you can predict it after you've been doing it for so long. So, of course, whenever we think it's starting to near the volume capacity, we are going to go out there and collect those samples. And of course, if it overfills, then our technicians are going to go out there and say, it's overfilled. We know we've missed samples. We're not going to be able to use this data. So the laboratory parameters, of course, was the TSS, TP, and TN. So don't forget, we're not doing CBOD because it's not required for pollutant loadings reduction. So that's why you don't see that. And if it was, it would be extremely hard because CBOD also has a time frame of 2 days. So once you collect that sample, you have 2 days to get it analyzed. So it would be a very difficult parameter to continually sample. Here's a 5-year compliance report summary for the continuous program. So during that 5 years, 714 sampling events were attempted. This does not include, this doesn't include going out, collecting flows, changing the battery if it went dead, or all the other little maintenance issues that you deal with. The 714 sampling events, that was just going out there and actually attempting to collect a sample event. So data was used to estimate target pollutant export. So our rigorous QA procedures disqualified certain data. I kind of compare our QA procedures as to really security at the airport. By the time that data is where we can use it, it has went through so many QA procedures. It's really hard to get a certain amount of data because of how many procedures it does go through, which we want quality data. We don't want just any data. So we are willing to throw out data if it does not meet our QA requirements. So 78.7% of the watershed was captured, and then we prorated that to equal 100% of the watershed. Challenges that included, of course, I told you 568 or unnamed trib of Little River, the development of the stage discharge relationship. It was so flashy that by the time we got out there, it was back to base levels. It was an intermittent stream. There was just a lot of challenges that dealt with 568. Now, Elm Creek, there was also challenges with it. Flood stage discharge measurements were unacquired. Of course, at the time, we didn't have our ADCP, which allowed us to get those high measurements. So we only had up to a certain level And of course, since we didn't have that accurate stage discharge, those flow measurements, we pretty much had to do, we had to estimate our pollutant load. Well, we had to estimate the stage discharge relationship basically, and that's how we got our pollutant load estimation. So now some of the challenges that we had, of course, increasing the percent of the year sample, that's just for any sampling program. Anyone that's ever done continuous sampling, you're just going to have a lot of difficulties with certain things when you're dealing with this type of a program. Down here at the bottom's kind of our Excel spreadsheet right here for our totals. I kind of wanted to show you what it might look like. So with our 78.7% of the watershed, you can see here, this is our Oklahoma City calculated load for each parameter. And then here is that OKC long-term average, the reduced long-term average. So that's what we had to get under. Of course, with the 78.7%, it looked like we were doing pretty good on two of these parameters. Total nitrogen, we were already double. Then there's the Oklahoma City waste load allocation. That's that single day criteria. Of course, there's our violations. So all of those sampling events that we had, that's how many violations that we had throughout the year. Now, whenever we prorated it to the 100%, there you can see still doing pretty good on total phosphorus and total suspended solids. And then, of course, total nitrogen still failing. So same thing with the waste load allocations. It's going to be the same violation. So whether you prorate it or not. So anyways, that was just a quick snapshot of that. And of course, if you ever want to know more about our TMDL sampling, a lot of this should be on our annual report. Okay, so we're continuing here. So some of our recommendations was continue to conduct the long-term monitoring in Hog and Elm Creek watersheds. Really, that wasn't really a recommendation, I guess, but I mean, it's still a requirement. There's just no way we can get out of really conducting these long-term monitoring. But we did recommend to retire Station 568 because, like I said earlier, we're just not getting good enough data. The data is too noisy. It was all of those challenges basically. So we decided to opt out of 568 and just continue Hog and Elm Creek watersheds. So here I've got a table right here, and this is why it's so important to get collecting high flow measurements. These high flow measurements can create an accurate stage discharge relationship, and it's going to be key to getting your quality estimated pollutant loading. So you can see here, this is when all that rain came back in July. We went out there and we were collecting high flows with our ADCP. And so this is what we ended up getting right here, high flows, average CFS, cubic feet per second. That's how fast the water's moving. So I was averaging about 416 cubic feet per second. So we had already gotten high flows throughout the year and maybe a year ago. And so our stage discharge was created. So you can see here, whenever I look at my Hawk monitoring my data that's online, where it shows my level, I've already created my stage discharge relationship that I was telling y'all about. So what happens is that, which I didn't mention this, but that area velocity, that pressure transducer, it's telling how high the water is. And so where how high that water is will tell, we tell it, hey, okay, well, if the water is at 1 foot, put this much CFS. So that's how you create your stage discharge relationship all the way up to as however high you want to go. So if you can get accurate measurements with actual data, and that's what you're going to get. So right here, you can see that going out, collecting these high flows, we had a 3.49% relative percent difference, which is awesome. That's what you want to see. You want to see less than 10% error when you're comparing your flow measurements. So that's why it's so important to get this high flow quality data. And just real quickly, I just really want to show everyone kind of how we're doing for the 2023. Doesn't look too good, but this is also the long-term average. So we're still halfway. We really just went through our rainy cycle, I guess you would call it. And we had extremely high flows. You can see right there, we've had 9, 11, 7-day violations for some of our parameters already. But it really just depends. If it doesn't rain, theoretically, we shouldn't have that much pollutant loadings coming through, and really our long-term average would somewhat kind of decrease depending on the flow. So it definitely depends on the flow, the amount of water comes through, because if we estimate that there was a ton of flow that came with one storm, it can wipe out the entire year basically. And that's what we saw with 570 back in 2019, where one storm accounted for, I want to say it was 70% or 90%. It was extremely high of the entire year's pollutant loading. So those big storms, they will pretty much just wipe you out on being compliant within your loading. Other than that, I made it just under an hour. So thank you guys. I also, if there's any difficult questions, I've got my special person over here, Martin Tobert, that can definitely help me assist me with any questions that anyone has. So thank you guys.
Awesome. Well, that was definitely a very technical but very excellent presentation. Thank you so much, Dawson. I don't see any questions in chat yet. So please, if anyone does have any questions, feel free to get those typed out, or you can always reach out to myself or Dawson later. Thank you, Michaela. She gave you a round of applause. I did post our link to our flip book, our annual report for 2022 into chat. So if anyone's curious about that, feel free to check that out as well. And as a reminder, if anyone would like to receive a certificate of attendance for today's presentation, please send me an email to request that. We ask that you don't request those in chat because I may or may not have your email address linked to your username on Teams. So go ahead and just send me an email if you would. And I should be able to get those certificates out hopefully this week. And as we've mentioned, a recording of today's presentation will also be available on our website, and then probably sometime early next week. And I'm going to put that link for chat into chat for you right now, so you can go directly to that if you want to see a recording of this presentation. So thank you all for attending today's session. I hope everyone enjoyed the presentation and you're all continuing to enjoy our webinar series. We hope to see you again on October 12th, the next installment of our bi-monthly webinar series. In that October session, we will be hearing from Dr. Jamie Schuessler from Oklahoma State University. Go Pogues. Sorry, I now have 2 daughters that are at OSU, so sorry. Dr. Schuessler's presentation is entitled Improvements to Erosion and Sediment Control Design Through Performance-Based Testing. And this presentation features, among other things, a study on the use of flocculants to reduce sediment discharges from construction sites. So we hope everyone can tune in again in October, but we're going to hang out here for just a little bit in case anyone does have any questions. Other than that, Have a great afternoon. Thank you, everyone.